Welcome to EHO Knows. In this episode, we're going to be looking at the future of technology. In the past couple of episodes, been looking at a lot of the HR and challenges facing environmental health officers. Here we want to have a little bit of a glimmer of hope as to some of the cool stuff that's coming along with technology that will actually make your life easier. I remember years ago hearing a quote, though, that technology changes far less over 3 years than you expect and far more over 10 years than you could ever imagine. And so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be having a look at the next couple of years, which is really what's happening now, but we're going to try and guess what's going to happen in 10 years. And being honest, we've got Buckley's of really telling what's going to be happening in 10 years. But to do that, I thought we're going to be bringing in the big guns. So today's episode, Andrew Mathieson, anyone who's heard him talk, absolutely amazing whiz at what he has done in the past, the knowledge that he brings and his goal to share. So here we go. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks, Shane. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here today to have a chat about these ideas. Maybe I should introduce myself first of all to the audience that isn't aware of who I am. My name is Andrew Mathieson. I'm an academic at the Australian National University. My background is environmental health, which I started back in Scotland, both as an EHO and then as a manager, then moved to Australia, worked as a senior EHO in a number of authorities in Australia before migrating or transitioning back to academia at ANU. So my passion is education and training. I'm also a member of Environmental Health Australia and a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Environmental Health, and the Royal Environmental Health in Scotland. I'm also a director of the International Federation of Environmental Health, and would encourage your viewers to actually look up what the IFEH is and how it could do for you, because that's where I get a lot of my ideas from.
So you're not just a Ponzi academic who's got your head up in the clouds. For years and years, you were actually an environmental health officer. So you've walked the walk, now you talk the talk.
Well, you put it that way. I would say that being in the clouds is quite a nice view. But yeah, I've been a manager, I've been an EHO, I've done food inspections in the tens of thousands. I've worked with businesses, I've prosecuted, I've closed them down. As I say, education is my preference, but where education fails, regulation takes effect, and I'm very happy to prosecute where the risks to the public are significant or unacceptable. So yeah, I've got good experience. Let's leave it there.
Yes. Okay. So recently you did a talk in Dubai on future tech. And so I've seen that and I thought this is a fantastic opportunity to be talking about it. So we'll primarily just focus on the inspection part of the EHO role. Where's technology taking us?
I think we need to unpick that question a little bit, that when you talk about inspection, because you've got to think about what's the purpose of that inspection. Is the purpose to catch people out, the purpose to educate, or is it to actually gain confidence of what the business is doing? And I would say for the long term, it's about working out what that trajectory of the business is. Is the business doing well? In which case the environmental health team's there to support them, to help them actually sort of keep moving forward. Where things are starting to deteriorate and they're starting to break down some of the procedures or the policies, then we want to help them catch that early and put interventions in place so that they don't become a hazard to the population. And that's where technology can come in to actually help us out, whether it's remote monitoring, remote inspections, all the little gadgets and tools that we could be using to actually gather that data and help that business.
Yeah. We had the fun and games of COVID. So suddenly COVID was 2 years where all the rules just got thrown out, all the practices got thrown out, and suddenly we couldn't do face-to-face or whatever. So what are some of the nice changes that have started to come out of, because of COVID? Yeah.
Well, COVID was a terrible time for everyone, it was an opportunity for local authorities and for the environmental health profession to reset itself a little bit and say, well, we can't do this sort of like spontaneous inspection anymore. We can't do the classic 1 or 2 visits a year. We have to actually look at smarter ways of working. And that's actually working with businesses more and actually engaging with the business process and the business as it operates. So some of it is remote inspections, like I mentioned very briefly before. We also introduced what's called the curbside inspection, which is literally the walk past and glance in the door to look and see what the public sees. Because if when you're looking from the public's perspective, and a wise EHO knows what to look for, you can actually get an indication of the actual level of compliance and level of safety that's been achieved by looking through that business. So if there's good practices and good habits, and the staff are clean and looking hygienic, and you can see they're washing their hands, and the wash basin hasn't filled with water or utensils, you can see that they're operating it properly, then that quick 5 minute sort of rapid inspection is actually enough to give you confidence that they're working reasonably. Now that's not enough overall to say that they're compliant with the legislation, but that rapid inspection is a little sort of snapshot in time to say, I've got confidence that business operating safely. Move on to the next one where maybe they're not operating safely and they need more time spent on them.
Let's just quickly double back as well to remote inspections. What's a remote inspection actually look like?
Well, I've actually seen some really good examples of this. Our colleagues in North America and Canada have started doing this, where they actually are getting businesses, they're phoning the business up, because it may be 4 or 5 hours from where the office is for the council, where the EHO is, to where the business is. So they phone the business up and say, switch your camera on, let's do a walk around the premises with the camera on. And actually, is it worth us driving that 4 hours out to do a half-hour inspection and back again? Whereas that 5 minute phone call may be actually enough. So remote inspections are a sort of new way of thinking, that you don't need an EHO in the room. Now, it doesn't totally replace it, because you don't get the sense of how sticky the floor is or what the smell of the premises is like. The other advantage of that phone is you can actually record the conversation, you record the inspection. So you could arrange to do an inspection remotely, take 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and say, open the fridge, look at the fridge seals, look at the thermometer, put a thermometer in the fridge or the freezer, look at how the food's been stored in a walk-in chiller. All that detailed part of what an inspector does, you can do remotely with a camera. And you can record it, you can look at it back afterwards. It serves as a record of that inspection. Now, we don't tend to do that now. We don't tend to do the body cameras, but some councils have started that.
Yeah. So here in Australia, we have the problem of, a lot of remote councils, big distances. And so if you've got a business that you're basically happy with, just give them a call, get them to pull out the camera and just walk around. So awesome way of just easily getting through all the places that you're happy with, so that you can focus on the places you're not happy with.
One of the biggest challenges about remote operating in Australia is the lack of EHOs on the ground. And instead of compromising the qualification and using one of the rangers to do the inspections, because they're enforcement officers, and they're not there for education or support. You don't need to use the ranger to do this. You could have an EHO working as a consultant 1,000 kilometres away doing that remote inspection. So you can actually give the council and the ratepayers confidence that that business is compliant without actually compromising who the inspector actually is. So it's a new way of thinking, I think, is important.
So you were just talking about with the remote inspections being able to record the videos, and that's really a great segue into the next big advantage with technology, which is it's basically computers are designed to store data. And so we're now getting to the stage where if you're walking in with pen and paper, if you're walking in with an Excel spreadsheet, you really have to be asking what's going on. From an environmental health officer's point of view, record keeping, what's the technology that's already out there that's now becoming affordable?
I think, again, the Canadians are leading on this one. They've got the handheld tablets that's got the pre-programmed questionnaires. So every premises that you go to, it asks you to take photographs to evidence the compliance and evidence the non-compliance. So it actually integrates the inspection process with the record-keeping process. And that also then automatically generates the inspection report. So when you take a photograph of something, it's got a pop-up menu to say, is this compliant, not compliant? If it's not compliant, what's the level of non-compliant? And again, the paragraphs that it then generates are related to that, and then relates to the regulations. So it's very comprehensive reports can be produced from that semi-automated approach. But it also then, as I say, it integrates that data record keeping. So you can go back, if the business owner says, it wasn't as bad last time, you can go back live on your iPad to the previous inspection and the one before that and the one before that. Whereas if you're just sitting in the record that councils used to keep, the paper-based ones, we take photographs, but you just have a pack of photographs, and it wouldn't be related to what was actually necessarily the date or the time. It's just you'd open the folder and 4 packs of photographs would fall out. You go, oh, which one was that? And you'd have to go back and reorganize it, where that all takes time. Whereas with the digitization, it's all done for you. So you've just got the little thumbnail of the photograph, but when you click it, you get a full page photograph of what they actually saw that they can then zoom in onto. So that tool is really useful for that inspection, the education, and showing the history of that inspection back to the business. Or if you're going to prosecute, you've then got that record itself already embedded in the system. Another way that the tech's working, again, with our colleagues in North America and what they're looking at, and some of the large private companies, they're doing big data recording. So they'll give a business 15, 20 thermometers, humidity sort of monitoring, so that every fridge can be monitored, every hot plate, every freezer, and each product can be monitored if they really want to. And then it automatically Bluetooths it into a little sort of magic box and then squirts it up to a sort of a dashboard. But a dashboard then could have SMS messages to the manager to say fridge 4 is out of temperature, etc., etc. And I know that Coles and Woolies are doing this as well. They've got digital, online, live digital monitoring of their fridges and freezers throughout most of the stores. So again, that gives that confidence to the manager and to the auditors or the inspector that that business is compliant. And it helps with the other thing it helps with is spotting when the fridge is starting to the compressor's breaking down or some other problems happening with that fridge freezer, because it starts becoming an amber alert. It's not a red because it's out of compliance, but the number of times it starts creeping up towards the temperature that we don't want, it then gives them an amber alert, so they can actually say, oh, that maybe needs a service. So that early intervention is part of that new approach with data.
It's really timely, that entire concept, because, with the changes to the food standards, I got really excited when they said, oh yeah, we're going to now mandate record keeping. But then it was a crock, because all it said was records have to be kept, and it's got no indication as to whether or not it's manual, how often it's to be done. But what's really, really cool is, from a technology point of view, it's now got to the stage where they've got all these electronic devices that could be collecting the data automatically. That data can be then stored on the cloud. And then if you're stepping in and doing an inspection, if they're saying, oh yeah, here's my Clever Logger temperature logging system, here's the beautiful graphs that it produces, rather than relying on some pimply 15-year-old faking the results because he's been sleeping every single night rather than collecting data, here's the proof. But what you're saying is we can actually go 2 steps further. That data is now in the cloud, and there's no reason why it can't be flowing all the way through to an environmental health officer and being pinged when there's a problem. But what's really cool is, by the time you get to that level, the restaurant owner, the managers, they're all being alert anyway, and that they're proactive. So really, really interesting times.
So sorry to jump in again, but here's a radical thought. So how about we make that data available to the public? How about, because we've got the scores and the doors concept, which is, well, the concept's okay, but the fact that you don't show anything less than 3 stars, so you don't so if they've got no stars, you don't know they're bad premises. Whereas if you were actually doing the system properly, you'd be showing all the stars, but also you've got a QR code on that certificate, and you could actually click on it and look at the live temperature records of the premises then and there, and actually see if they're all in the green or in the amber or the red. So why has the public not got access to that data? Because then that's where self-regulation comes in. So if you got the public saying voting with their feet, maybe that's the scare. But if the public can actually look at your published data, see how compliant you are. How about your QR code just gives you the last inspection report and it says compliant or not compliant? Give the public the information to make decisions, and I think we very quickly have a lot more compliance.
Yes. We then can extrapolate 1 step further and go, well, wait a minute, why aren't we also watching what the public's saying about restaurants? So, what's happening in Facebook, what's happening in, the food poisoning reporting sites and all that sort of stuff. And, wouldn't it be interesting that you could see 30 people's profiles have all complained about food poisoning, but in their profiles, 20 of them were also reporting that they were eating at Instagram is showing photos of food from this restaurant. Facebook is complaining about the fact that they've got food poisoning, and you put it all together and go, wait a minute, here's the cause. And so starts on Saturday night. By Sunday, you're getting something that's saying, hey, we think you've got a problem at this restaurant. And this is not happening now. And you've got all the questions as to data privacy and all those sort of stuff and connecting. But we are literally heading down the path where all of this data is open and we just need to start sharing it. And so we've now got tools there that can potentially start to analyse the data a lot better and then be saying, hey, we think we've got a problem there. Now that I've dropped the AI and how can you have an episode on future tech, what do you think will be the impact of AI for environmental health officers short term and medium term? We won't go long term because AI is going to take over the world and then we're going to have World War III. But short term, medium term, where do you think AI is taking us?
There's some really interesting developments with our colleagues in North America. The guys out of California have actually created an AI bot for legislation. So they've put all the food regulations for California into a smart bot. And the idea is that you can then ask it questions and they're trying to teach it how to interpret photographs as well. So when it looks at sort of how the business is operating, is that a photograph of good operation or a bad operation? So they're trying to educate the AI into that visual technology. It's not out and working yet, but that's what they're heading towards. So that's one of the big directions that people are moving in. The other thing is you touched on the social media.
Sorry. I was just going to say, taking that one 2 steps forwards, though, then you go, okay, remote inspection. So let's have the AI make the call and say, hey, we're doing a remote inspection. Take a photo of your fridge, take a photo of this, take a photo of that, and then have AI do the inspection so that it can then turn around and say, hey, we think you need to look at this. It is just that really interesting concept of how much do you as an environmental health officer have to do and how much will technology, AI, be taking that off your plate in the future so that you can focus on specific problems. But that one's, over the horizon.
No, well, it's not far away because if the Americans are doing that just now, the next stage is let's put CCTV in each of the premises. So over the high-risk food station, let's have a camera that's watching and learning, using the learning profile of AI as to what's good practice and bad practice. Then that won't take 10 years to do that learning component. It'll take 50 cameras and 50 premises for 10 days maybe, and actually get an idea of what cross-contamination looks like. Is it chicken sitting beside the lettuce? Well, the camera should be able to pick that up, whether it's colour or whether it's product identification. So we need those 3 different tiers of response. And some of it's just a letter and encouragement, some of it's a letter with education, and some of it's more aggressive than that, either to prosecute or to serve penalty notices, whatever the tool is that you've got at your disposal.
Yes. So concept, we now say you have to have a food safety supervisor on site. In years to come, that food safety supervisor could literally be a camera on the wall recording everything and then saying, hey, wait a minute, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. Not saying getting rid of food safety supervisors, but that's effectively where we're heading. You heard about it here first. Okay, we're just going to race out. We're going to trademark it. Yes. AI is also a really interesting tool for creating documents and writing reports. And so anyone who's not already checking out ChatGPT, yes, there are a lot of things about data privacy and what should be sharing there, but it is interesting how it is just massively speeding up a lot of the routine sorts of things. But if you want something really, really cool, just turn around and drop in a hypothetical. I'm an environmental health officer and I've had a problem with asbestos and blah, 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 and I need to write a letter. Please write that letter for me. And you haven't passed over any information, and suddenly it's creating this big, huge document for you. And it works well in that scenario because what it's writing is already on the internet. Whereas what I find with AI is as soon as you ask it to create something new that's not out there, it's hopeless. But if you're doing anything that you've already got 500 documents that look like it, or they're on the internet.
So either from inspections or from auditing or from letter writing, from policy development, that integration is where we've got to be heading as well from a local government point of view. And sort of at different businesses, I've talked to national government and federal government level or even state government level about trying to introduce that. But again, I've got to give you an example from Canada that almost every council in Canada uses the same inspection, auditing, risk assessment, data management system, and accounting system. So it's one simple package that's fully integrated and relatively low cost when you compare it to what we're paying in Australia. And it's adaptable, which is the other challenge. I've worked in Australia, and a lot of the systems that we operate, and without naming any names, that they just about do the job you want, but they don't do anything that you want to enhance. And you can't change it easily because this is the package you bought, this is the package you get. The advantage of what I've seen with the Canadian package is that it's adaptable, it's tunable. You can go back to the developer to say, I need this tweak, I need that tweak, so that you've got the same data management system, but your interface works for how you want it. And that's the nice thing about new technology. You can actually tune it into that.
Yeah. So we do have the interesting challenge that for anything to be rolled out statewide or even worse nationally, by the time it gets signed off by absolutely everyone, but there's benefits in having the same system across everything. But at the same time, there's benefits in being able to say, no, here's our specific requirements, we need to tweak it that way. And my guess is in Australia, we are going to have the struggle of councils are turning around and saying, no, we're not going to commit to a system because we're waiting to find out what's going to be national. And then there's other councils that are going to be going, no, we're ahead of the game and we're signing up. It's also a little bit of a tough one in terms of we've signed up with X, but Y is now better. How often can you change and get the benefits? But definitely councils nowadays, if you don't have an electronic system for record keeping, for public feedback and all that sort of stuff, they really need to be investigating what's available there. And there's some really exciting stuff happening internationally, and it will flow back into Australia eventually. Because the great thing about technology is it's becoming cheaper and it does what you need. Whereas historically, the reason why we don't do things is it was either impossible or it was too expensive. Yeah, I'd like to see an environmental health officer who says, oh, we've got a problem, we're under budget and we've got all this money to spend and we've just been told that we've got more money that we need to spend. Yeah, so that would be a fascinating one for the future. Future problems of environmental health officers, too much money. Now you're dreaming.
But on that a little bit is that there's some of the councils are looking to how to spend the budget smarter. And that's an interesting idea because we charge just now for inspections, we charge for your food regulation, registration, etc. But how about, and we also charge businesses business rates, but we don't reward good businesses. So I know we were talking to one of the councils up in Sydney who the idea was is that if the food business did training that they approved or extra training, not just the minimum they've got to do, but if they trained all their staff regularly, they would actually reduce the business rates by a percentage or reduce the inspection fee or reduce the number of inspections. So there was a fiscal reward back to the business because just now there's no actually reward for investing in education or training for business. They just say I've spent $20,000 on training over the last 3 or 4 years because of high staff turnover, but we think training is important. And then to the council to say, well, can you reduce rates a little bit or could you give us something back to reflect that? Whereas the bad businesses are not putting the money into training, they're not actually protecting the public. To some extent, encouraging a business to do what we want them to do anyway should have a fiscal reward. And that's again a little bit about thinking about out the box for regulation and for rates.
Yeah, my big gripe with scores on doors was that as much as it's a 5-star system, it's really a 3-star system, 3, 4, 5. It would have been awesome if we just stripped it back. And so if you follow all the regs, it's 3 stars. But if you go in and have every single person doing the food safety supervisor course, that's worth a couple extra points.
Our interpretation of the star system is just fundamentally flawed. We should have introduced the 5 stars the way it was designed because it came out of Europe originally. And basically premises that had 1 star were the minimum level of compliance. And then extra stuff that you did, extra training, record keeping, etc., gave you extra stars. And it was very clear definitions of what these were. So if a business said, "Oh, I want to be a 5-star premise," you say, "Here's the 5-star standard." You don't go to a 5-star hotel or a 3-star hotel and say, "This is the minimum standard I accept." No, 1 star was what the minimum was to comply. But we just ignored 1, 2, and brought in the 3, 4, and 5 on its own.
Yes, it'll be interesting to see comments on episodes, and will we be taken down in flames for comments here or propped up? Will it, no matter everything else we said, will this be the one hot
Happy to
topic?
defend. Say, come and see me in Brisbane at the national conference. I'll be there. I'll be at a stand. I'll be standing there with the International Federation right beside EHA. If you disagree with anything that I've said, let's have a chat about it.
Yeah, and I guess also we're talking about technology, and one of our goals is we want the conversation to be happening. So it's one thing to have awareness, but what you need to be doing as an environmental health officer is having conversations with other environmental health officers and asking them, hey, what's the new stuff that's out there that's making your life easier? What's the stuff that I should be doing? But then you need to be going back to council and having that conversation and saying, hey, we need to be starting to invest in some of these things. And so that's one of the sort of takeaways right now is, and part of it is just to say, as you step into restaurants, they've got new toys and you're needing to say, hey, wait a minute, this restaurant is now actually ahead of the game and let's be encouraging them to do it. Okay, so I was talking to someone who's doing PhD about doing swabs for inspections, and what's really interesting is the turnaround times are reducing in terms of how quickly you get results. What are some of the practical sorts of toys that are coming out to help an inspector detect things that have never been detected before?
I really like the ATP swabs, which is a really simple technology. It's been around for a number of years, but it's getting smarter and more refined. And it basically gives you a count of the energy component of a cell, what the ATP is. So whether the cell is viable or whether it's been broken down and just a dirty surface, there's still ATP there. So you can look at a visually clean surface, you can swab it, and you can get an ATP count and give you an indication of whether that's a clean surface or a dirty surface. And that's wonderful because it's a 15-second test, but it costs maybe $1 a test, and that's the drawback for councils. If you were going to do 4 or 5 swabs in every premises, the bill starts to add up. But again, is $5 that much? If you're actually giving them real information then and there, you swab it, it gives you a high count. You say you've physically cleaned it. You might have killed all the bugs, and that's the other thing. An educated business owner or operator has opinions, but what we want to do is actually give evidence to that opinion, support it with data, and that's what ATP can actually do.
I've sat in cafes where you just watch the waiter, the waitress come over with the filthiest looking cloth and just doing a big smear job across the tables. And so that's what it allows you to do, is it looks clean, but it's not clean. Let's actually put a number against it so that we can then start to have a benchmark as to what's actually clean.
But there's another way to do a low-tech, new-tech option that I've seen, is you use a sanitizer with a marker on it. So if you spray a sanitizer over a table and wipe it down, but you've actually put a UV component in the sanitizer.
Now, this is where we get the opportunity to do a shameless plug, because been products on the market for years now, like Glowgerm and Glitterbug. So if you're doing hand washing training, the only way that you can really demonstrate that it's doing its job is to have someone put something on their hands, have it disappear, have them go wash their hands, come back, use a UV torch, and then do a reveal. And shameless plug, Glow to Show, it's actually my product. Andrew and I have been talking about how to do a better version of these other products for years, and Glow to Show is the result of that. But really what it's all about is we have a fundamental belief that if you can't see it, it must be clean. And so Glow to Show for hand washing, there's a hand sanitizer version where you literally sanitize your hands and we can show you what's been sanitized or not. So shameless plug. But you can be going onto any site and saying, hey, I'm going to test your hand washing technique. and you are literally testing their hand washing technique. Whereas if you just go, hey, when do you wash your hands? And they go, oh yeah, there's a sink and we wash our hands. You've got no proof that they even know how to do it.
It works on the tables.
Yeah.
If they were using a sanitizer with a UV on it, and you can then put a torch on it, you can see that it's got the glow on the table.
Yes, I think it's really, really interesting to be able to, actually say, look, we've got it on a table, and when you're doing your wipe, you're just getting what you visibly see, but you're actually missing the majority of it. And when you sneeze, you don't see where most of that sneeze goes. And so, to have any tool that teaches you how to, and any tool that allows you to test and quantify is worth its weight in gold.
Absolutely.
Yes. I've seen too many episodes of CSI, though, where they walk into the hotel rooms.
Bedrooms.
You go, everyone should walk around with one of those torches.
Yeah, but you don't want to see what your bed's like, or the walls like, or the headboard's like, because they never clean the headboard.
Too much information, but no, we're talking to environmental health officers, and they're going, yeah, we know that.
So.
Yeah, this is probably a good place to wrap up and say, hey, what would be really, really cool is drop in your comments. What are the sorts of things that you're starting to use? What's helpful or whatever? Reach out to me to saying, hey, we're starting to use such and such, and it would be great to jump onto EHO Knows as a guest and to be able to share your experience. So, yes, thank you, Andrew, very much for your time. Hopefully we'll have him back on one day to be talking about some of the awesome stories from the past. I doubt that we'll get his army stories on public record. And so thank you very much for being here today. Thanks for the awesome work. Just a goal to educate and to equip not only Australia, but the world's environmental health. So thank you very much, Andrew.
Thanks for having me, Shane. Thanks very much.